My name is, sorry, let's try this one more time. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Defy Dementia, Never Quit Quitting, Healing the Smoker's Brain. My name is Roseanne Alliong. I'm the Executive Director of Research, Innovation, and Translation at the Baycrest Academy for Research and Education, as well as the Director for Research, Innovation, and Translation at the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation. For those of you who might have registered, I am not Dr. Allison Sekuler, who unfortunately sends her regrets. She couldn't join us this afternoon. So I am pinch hitting, designated hitting. For those of us in the baseball crowd, I am subbing in today. But first, I'd like to start off with a land acknowledgement. Although we are meeting virtually today, we acknowledge that Baycrest operates on the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations, which have cared for the land for thousands of years, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. And we recognize the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This land remains home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and is subject to the dish with one spoon wampum, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land today, and you may live and be joining us and working in different territories. So we encourage you to reflect on the land on which you are located today and to consider your relationship to the land and to the people who are the traditional keepers of the land. So Katarina, may I ask you to advance the slide, please? Just a little bit of housekeeping. So we would ask you to please stay on mute unless you are speaking. You can find your audio button at the bottom of your Zoom screen with a little audio button. You can click it to mute or unmute yourself. Please feel free to turn on your camera if you're comfortable and join our special guests on the video screen. We'd love to see you. And again, that's the video button right next to the audio button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Closed captioning is available for those who are interested. There is, again, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, a little CC icon, show captions. Click on that and captions will appear. We are together for 90 minutes, so please take breaks as needed, whether that be a bio break, a coffee break, a tea break, a water break, whatever you would care for. At the bottom of the Zoom screen, you can see the chat function. That will be your way to communicate with us as well. If you're looking for any assistance or you'd like to say hello, I encourage, if you haven't had a chance, please say hello in the chat with us. We are recording today's session. You might have noticed we turned on the recording at the top. We will be only recording the portion with Dr. Johnson and Linda Ruth Siglin. We will not be recording during the group discussion at the end. All right. I think I have completed housekeeping, and we would also invite you to come off mic during our open discussion, because we are trying to create what we call a book club for podcasts. So it's our opportunity for us to hopefully have a great conversation with our audience today. And we just want to remind everyone, we want to create a safe, respectful, and supportive environment with one person speaking at a time. Next slide, please. We'd also like to thank our funders, without whom this event would not be possible: the Slate Family Foundation, Baycrest, and of course, the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation. Next slide, please. And it is my distinct honor to welcome two very special guests who I think you all see on your screen. I'd like to first introduce Linda Ruth Siglin, who holds law degrees from Harvard and McGill universities and has worked in research, policy, and advocacy in both government and nonprofit settings. She is an active member of the LEAP community from the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation, so she's an old friend for all of us. And where she co-leads the Tech and Q&A program. She brings her lived experience of quitting smoking decades ago to today's discussion on dementia prevention. So please join me in welcoming Linda Ruth to the stage. Above her icon box, I'd like to introduce Dr. Adrienne Johnson, who's an assistant professor at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health Department of Medicine. She's also an investigator at the Wisconsin Center for Tobacco Research and Intervention, and is a faculty affiliate of the Wisconsin Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. As a licensed clinical psychologist with expertise in health psychology and neurological disorders, Dr. Johnson's research focuses on reducing the impacts of smoking and understanding its role in brain health particularly as it relates to Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Johnson to the virtual stage. Next slide. Yes, perfect. So I'd like to start off with just a broad overview about dementia. Just the idea, many of you have heard of Alzheimer's disease, but what we wanted to introduce to some of you is the term dementia, which is an umbrella term really that describes a collection of clinical symptoms that can include memory, can include emotional changes that are caused by disorders affecting the brain. Dementia affects 50 million people worldwide as of 2020. And the most common form, which many of you would have heard of, is Alzheimer's disease, which accounts for 60 to 70% of dementia cases. But you can see under the umbrella that there are other types of dementia, namely vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal dementia, and there are others. And there's even some with mixed pathology. So we want to make sure that people kind of level set with the language when we talk about dementia. It is a collection of conditions, and Alzheimer's disease is one type. But one thing we want to absolutely make clear is that, Kat, next slide. Dementia is not a normal part of aging. Okay, so if nothing else, we really hope that people walk away today with that message. But the reality is that currently in 2025, there are over 770,000 Canadians living with dementia today. And it is estimated that by 2050, that number could increase to 1.7 million who are diagnosed with dementia. Next slide. Now, although many people may be thinking, you know, I have a family history of dementia, I'm automatically going to get Alzheimer's disease or dementia, not all cases of dementia are genetic. And in fact, we're here today to share with you that 45% of the population's risk of developing dementia is modifiable, and that we can do something to actually reduce our dementia risk. So, next slide. We're going to give you 14 different factors that can be modified that you can take action on today. Obviously, we're going to focus in on smoking, but we want to share with you that in early life, the quality of your education can serve as a risk, as to reduce your risk of developing dementia. In your midlife, there is a wide variety of things that you can work on to reduce your dementia risk, like, treating hearing impairment, dealing with high cholesterol, depression, traumatic brain injury, physical inactivity, diabetes, our specialty today of choice, smoking, high blood pressure, obesity, excessive alcohol. And in later life, some new factors came up, namely uncorrected visual impairment, air pollution, and social isolation and loneliness. So these are 14 different factors that we understand, according to the best science, that can actually be modified to reduce dementia risk and enhance brain health. Next slide, please. Now, as we mentioned, today's focus is on cigarette smoking. And what you see on the map is cigarette smoking use among Canadians aged 15 years and older. And although many people might think that smoking is not common, we do see that about nearly 11% of Canadians aged 15 years or older are smoking cigarettes. Now, that is typically older Canadians are age 25 and older report current smoking, compared to only 4% of Canadians aged 15 to 19. Smoking is more prevalent among men than women, where 13% of men reported that they were currently smoking, compared to 9% of women. Now, what we wanted to talk about is, yes, smoking does occur within our population, but what does that mean for the brain? And so I would like to invite Dr. Johnson to the virtual stage to tell us a little bit about that. Adrian, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And before we go on, I just want to note that when we talk about smoking, we're talking about combustible commercial tobacco use. So those are the cigarettes that you may buy at the gas station, at the grocery store, or places like that. But they're not traditional or sacred tobacco, which has been historically for centuries used by indigenous peoples. And I think it's really important that we keep in mind the health risks are not at all the same for those. So focusing on cigarettes, we know that cigarette smoking is the leading preventable cause of disease, death, and disability worldwide. It causes premature deaths in half of its users who don't quit. So it's unfortunately a big killer. And 80% of the 1.3 billion global tobacco users live in low and middle income countries. So it's definitely hitting certain populations more than others. Next slide. When we talk about smoking and tobacco specifically, we know that tobacco is responsible for more than 7 million deaths each year, and it's included in an estimated 1.6 million non-smokers exposed to secondhand smoke. So I think it's important that we recognize tobacco smoke from the smoker is what we'll talk about in terms of dementia risk, but there also is the issue of second and third hand smoke. So maybe someone's jacket who wasn't right next to you that still carries those chemicals and can have an impact. Next slide.
So we're going to open up a poll in the Zoom because we want to get our audience engaged and involved right away. And so what you're going to see on the screen is a poll and what comes to mind when you think about smoking and brain health. Please pick one of our options. I haven't thought about a connection before. I've heard smoking can affect memory or cognition, or I'm not sure there's a connection. Please select one and hit submit at the bottom right. All right, thank you, Katerina. You can see our smoking results that a good proportion of our audience have heard that smoking can affect memory or cognition. So I think you're in the right place because I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Johnson to share with us a few more details about what that actually looks like.
Thank you so much. And then hopefully that means you listened to our previous podcast. So what we know is that smokers face a significantly higher risk of dementia and dementia-related death. What we found is that about 14% of the dementia cases worldwide may be attributable to smoking, and that's at least 14% because we haven't talked about how those other modifiable risk factors that were discussed earlier can be impacted by smoking. Next slide. So current smokers are more likely to develop dementia. Some estimates suggest 30% more likely to develop any form of dementia and 40% more likely to develop Alzheimer's disease. My lab has specifically looked at this in 10,000 or more older adults, and we found an even higher risk of all dementias at 66%. The risk increases with smoking intensity. Again, this is something that's been debated, so it's important we note this. For every 20 cigarettes smoked per day, dementia risk rises by 34%. However, when we looked at models that looked at dementia risk as well as risk of death following dementia, we found that the risk was less about the how much or how long you've smoked, but more about the recency. Are you a current smoker? And that's particularly important for what we'll talk about today in terms of the benefits of quitting smoking. Next slide. When we talk about the benefits of quitting smoking, we love our figures in public health. So this is what we can think of. I really think it's helpful to note that even within a day, your carbon monoxide levels are reduced by more than half. Within 2 days, your lungs start to clear out some of the smoking debris. And if you have tried to quit before or have successfully quit and stayed quit, you may notice that kind of hacking first feeling. It doesn't always feel great, but what that is that's your body clearing out all of those chemicals and debris from the smoking. Within 72 hours, you've done that. You're breathing easier. You can go up the stairs without taking a break, things like that. Within 2 to 12 weeks, your circulation improves. Within less than a year, your coughing and wheezing is significantly reduced. Within a year, your risk of heart disease is cut by half. 10 years, your risk of lung cancer falls to half that of a smoker. And 15 years, your risk of a heart attack is the same as someone who never smoked. Next slide. When we talk about the benefits of quitting smoking, specifically for dementia, one of the important statistics I like to share with my patients is that within as early as 3 years, your risk of dementia could be comparable to that of someone who is a never smoker. Other estimates are showing 9 years of quitting showing the same results. So what we need to know is within 10 years, as early as 3, all the way up to 9, we are having that impact that you are able to be compared to someone who never smoked. Again, recency of the behavior matters. And it's really important that when you talk about changing your smoking, we talk about completely stopping. There's this notion of harm reduction, right? I want to cut down the risks of smoking. And unfortunately for dementia, it's not about just reducing cigarettes, it's about fully stopping for your risk of dementia. Lastly, quitting smoking, even at an older age, slows cognitive decline. There's been even more research showing this again, so it's definitely true and something to keep in mind. Back to you, Roseanne.
Thank you, Adrian. I'd like to stop sharing slides because I want to invite Linda Ruth to unmic and introduce herself and talk to, and Linda Ruth, if you might want to share with us a little bit about your smoking journey, because we mentioned that you were a smoker, but you had stopped for many, many years. Do you want to share with our audience a little bit about your smoking journey?
So I started smoking as a teenager. And we know from a lot of neurological research that the synapses and neurons in our prefrontal cortex are not fully connected in teenage brains. So teenagers don't always make the best choices. So smoking was portrayed as cool. And I grew up just outside of Montreal, and we used to go skiing every single weekend in the Laurentians. And I don't even know if they still do this or if it's even legal, but the ski chalet had a vending machine for cigarettes. So there wasn't anybody that you had to interact or show ID or anything. You just put your money in the vending machine and you got a pack of cigarettes. So my friends and I, that's what we did. We thought we were cool as 16-year-olds. And I mean, Dr. Johnson can talk more about this, but the manufacturers of cigarettes deliberately make them addictive. They want you to get hooked and not to quit. So I smoked for 10 years. And I quit at so I smoked from 16 to 26, which is really a long time ago, decades ago. So I'm really glad to see all that research that shows that my lungs and brain and heart and everything have cleared out of the effects of smoking. And it just got to the point. My then boyfriend and I were visiting his parents for Christmas, and they were not smokers. So for me to smoke, I had to go outside, and I mean, it was Texas, so it didn't matter that it was Christmas. It was still warm and everything. I could go for a walk and have a cigarette, but there was just something about being in a fully non-smoking environment that the smoking started to be really kind of disgusting to me. Like, the smell of it and it being on my clothes and things like that. So when we got back from that holiday, I thought, that's it. That's it. I'm done. I am going to be a non-smoker going forward.
So you say you made the decision, but how easy or difficult was the actual breaking up with cigarettes?
Well, it was kind of interesting because one of the things that really helped, and I don't know if this is a common experience for people, for probably about the next 2 years, I had a recurring dream. And in my dream, I would look down at my hand and there would be a lit cigarette in my hand with no memory or nothing in the dream that showed me taking out of the pack and lighting it up. It was just there. And I would wake up and I would be so grateful that it was a dream and it hadn't really happened, that it really helped reinforce my decision that no, I'm a non-smoker now. But I had that recurring dream probably for about 2 years after I made the decision to quit. And I think nowadays, I mean, this was decades ago, nowadays I think there's more help for people that want to quit than there was back then.
So Dr. Johnson, I wonder, does what Linda Ruth says like resonate with you? Like the fact that it's invading her dreams for cigarettes? But then also, the fact that, you know, all of this seems to be, you know, a long kind of the idea of the support that, you know, you shouldn't be doing it on your own.
Definitely. And we talked a little bit the other day about how that notion of dream interpretation, and what could that mean? I'll be honest, although I'm a clinical psychologist, that's not my area of focus. But to me, it really highlighted the identity that a behavior can have in who you are, and how changing that can be so impactful, but can also be scary, right? I worked so hard to move past this, to be a non-smoker, and I'm still fearful. What's going to happen? And although you had those dreams for 2 years, I do want to note it probably, I won't speak for you, wasn't the case that you were having cravings every day for 2 years, because that withdrawal symptoms only last for about 2 weeks or so. But it is important that we recognize it is something that is in people's lives, and it is a very addictive substance. We actually call it a chronic disease, not to blame anyone who's smoking, but the opposite, to recognize that it is very addictive. It hits your brain extremely fast, and it is very hard to quit. So Linda, Ruth, doing this, but on your own and then maintaining it is huge. It's amazing.
And Linda Ruth, I know you said you did it on your own, but were there like environments that you kind of avoided, or were there things that you did to kind of enable your journey? Like I on the podcast, we've had one of our persons with lived experience said, like, you know, he tried to explain to his friends, can you kind of not smoke around me because it really triggers me, for example, my mouth waters when I smell it. Did you have, like, you know, similar conversations with like friends or family or others to try to, you know, help yourself along?
I think one of the things I did was I actually stopped going to bars. Because
Mm.
back in the day, this is like decades ago, right? And smoking was allowed indoors. You know, we've sort of seen a progression. There was just smoking everywhere. And then these restaurants and bars started having these designated smoking areas, as if that was going to help, right? As if the smoke wasn't airborne and didn't spread to every part of it. So I think I just really backed off going to bars because I just didn't want to be in a smoky environment.
And Dr. Johnson, you know, how does these kind of environmental exposures as you're trying to quit, how does that, you know, impact your quitting journey? And what
They
do you tell your clients about, you know, exposures in these ways?
They're extremely impactful. And I love that Linda Ruth had the description of, unfortunately, was around her then boyfriend's parents and then said, oh, I'm not going to do this anymore. But setting a quit day is one of the first things we do. So a day when I'm truly going to be smoke free. And what we encourage people to do prior to that, so even up until midnight the night before, is to get rid of all of your cigarettes. And when I say get rid of, I mean break, wet, trash.
Oh, wow.
Because somebody who has been smoking, and Linda Ruth can speak to this, knows that, oh, well, I put it on the table and I'm not going to do it. Or it could possibly, I put it in the trash. I've seen many people pulling butts out of ashtrays. And I'm, again, in no way judging that, but that speaks to the addictive nature. So preparing for success, planning ahead, and that's the behavioral triggers. We also talk about avoiding other people or situations where people are smoking, because that's a huge trigger, especially for the first 2 weeks to a month. When you talked about bars, and I remember that as well, when bars here in the United States were allowing it in restaurants. And that's shifted. For us, it's not everywhere, but most of the places. Um, but to note that it's not just bars, it's actually alcohol too. We know that alcohol is strongly linked to cigarette smoking. And when you
Mhm.
think about whenever you drink, it lowers your inhibitions. So if you're trying to make a change in something that you've done for a long time and it's very hard to stop changing, it makes sense that it would be harder to stop. Or on the other end, it might sound fine to have one cigarette, which leads to two, which leads to five. And then you went to the gas station on the way home and bought a pack. So we avoid the triggers. We avoid the places, again, especially in those first 2 weeks to a month. We refrain from seeing people who are smoking, and that's not always possible. So if that's the case, we tell the people around us, as you suggested, Roseanne, hey, I'm making this change. You do whatever you want to do, but I just like you to know that if you could maybe smoke further away from me today, I'd appreciate it. And what I have found in my experience is that People who are smoking are some of the most accommodating people in the world because they are fully aware of what they're doing. They're fully aware of most of the health effects, but also that it impacts other people. And it is more respectful to tell someone what you're doing versus to basically ignore it and say, it's fine, do your own thing. They want to help, they want to support.
And Linda Ruth, before we move back to the slides, I just was wondering, having lived through this journey, is there one thing that you would want to share with our audience that really made a difference to you in your smoking journey, whether it be the decision to quit or staying quit all these years?
I think, Roseanne, it was that I started to see myself and define myself as a non-smoker. You know, and it was interesting, the statistic, Dr. Johnson, that you shared earlier about it's not just about tapering down, it's about really cutting off. So it's about making that shift from thinking of myself as a smoker to deciding, now I'm a non-smoker. And so I've been a non-smoker now for decades. And to the point that the smell of cigarette smoke actually really bothers me now. It doesn't trigger any cravings. There was a guy, he walked past me on the street smoking a cigarette, and the smoke kind of wafted in my face, and I was just like, ooh, 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 get it out of here, you know? So I think that shift in my identity was really, really important.
Amazing. I'm going to turn us back to the slides. Katerina, if I might solicit your assistance in loading some slides. What I wanted to share with our audience is that part of our, I guess, call to action today is how do we empower every one of us to actually take control of our brain health journey and reduce our dementia risk. So we here at Baycrest, with the support of the Slate Family Foundation and the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation, have started this initiative called Defy Dementia. It's to raise awareness of the modifiable risk factors for dementia and empower everyone to take actions in their everyday life to optimize their aging journey and reduce their dementia risk. Because as our podcast co-hosts say, you are never too young or too old to take care of your brain. So many of you might have listened to our podcast episode on smoking and dementia risk, which featured Dr. Johnson, Dr. Andrew Pipe, and a young smoker named Connor Dorr. So the podcast is meant to share different stories around the different modifiable risk factors. So please check out other episodes, but also other topics related to dementia. So for example, how do we communicate with individuals living with dementia? How do we, manage transitions potentially to long-term care? It's co-hosted by Dr. Allison Sekuler, President and Chief Scientist here at the Baycrest Academy and the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation, and noted science journalist and Order of Canada member, Jay Ingram. So as I said, please check out the podcast if you haven't already, like and subscribe. Now, the other things that we do is we do generate other types of resources because we recognize a podcast is not for everyone, although it is one of my favorites. But we have taken the key messages from certain episodes and created what we call short minute videos or animated videos and infographics. Now, today we're going to show you the animated video for our air pollution episode. And I'm going to ask Dr. Johnson after the video maybe to comment on the link between air pollution and cigarette smoking, because you might think was it really related? But I think Dr. Johnson might share a little bit about what the linkage might be. Katerina, please share the video. And turn up your volume so that you can hear the audio on your computers, please.
Air pollution has been on people's minds a lot recently. We've seen skies filled with wildfire smoke, prompting people to limit outdoor activities. But the idea that air pollution may be a risk factor for dementia is relatively new.
There's now research showing air pollutants can affect the brain and so increase your dementia risk. Sources of outdoor air pollution, like wildfire smoke or car exhaust, are obvious, but indoor air pollutants, like candles, air fresheners, and cooking fumes, are not.
So what can you do? When indoors, reduce pollution exposure by properly venting your stovetop, using an air purifier, or opening windows when the air quality index is good.
If you're heading outdoors, check the air quality index to assess your risk, reduce your pollution exposure by wearing a mask, and avoid highly polluted areas.
Take action to increase your air quality both indoors and outdoors, and decrease your dementia risk one breath at a time.
So I'm going to turn to Dr. Johnson and just ask, where does cigarette smoking come in the context of the video that everybody just saw?
Great question. So again, cigarette smoking, we are first talking about the first person, the person who is smoking, and that's where the large amount of research stands in terms of risk. However, there is research on air pollution, and that includes second and third hand cigarette smoke. So what that means is if you're around someone who is smoking directly, you are getting air pollution from that, and that can be indoor or outdoor. It can also be third hand, again, where it's somebody is smoking outside, right? But they come in with the jacket that they're wearing and it's still got a lot of that scent, and that scent does not go away very quickly. Linda Ruth can speak to that, I'm sure. So that can definitely impact us as well. One thing that we'll talk about is filters and how important that is for air pollution. And even here in Wisconsin, we are getting the effects of wildfires. So I definitely, experience it, and it is a real thing. Importantly, when we talk about cigarettes, there are filters in cigarettes. So a lot of people think, oh, well, that filter is protecting me just as a filter in my house is protecting me from air pollution. Unfortunately, that's not true. That is actually made up by the tobacco industry. So the people who are creating and selling these tobaccos. The reason the filter is there in cigarettes is to make it easier for you to swallow the cigarette smoke, is to make it easier for you to be addicted and stay addicted. So these are some of the examples, and there are many, that it's understandable to think, hey, I'm using ultralights or filtered or menthol, and it's going to help me because it's got that filter or it tastes better. That's not true. In fact, the opposite is true. It was made up by the tobacco industry.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I'm just going to turn us on the screen. You see that we also have infographics. So let's say, for example, podcasts are not for you. Maybe animated videos are not your preference. We do have one-page infographics that give the key messages for the podcast episode and how you can take action. And in fact, what you see on English and in French is actually the infographic associated with air pollution. So you can see a little bit about all the different ways that you can reduce your exposure to air pollution indoors and outdoors, and then by extension, reducing your dementia risk. Now, where do you find all these resources? Next slide. You can go to defydementia.org, where you can actually find a wealth of resources, not only access to the podcast, the animated videos, the infographics, but a big shout out to my colleague, Suzanne Pede, who curates resources that are listed on every single episode webpage. We also have an events section where you can go back and look at the videos for previous webinars and other events. So if you're looking for more information, please check out defydementia.org or anywhere you get your podcasts. Next slide. Now, remember that we talked about this is the book club, but for podcasts. So this is where we get interactive. I have seen some questions already in the chat. I love it. Please continue to add it to it. We're going to get there in just a second. We are going to stop sharing screen, and we're going to have everybody up on everybody's Zoom box up on the screen. We invite you to come off mic during our open discussion to open your camera if you'd like to share your face with us. And if you're comfortable, we'd love to see you. Again, we want to make sure it's a safe, respectful, and supportive place with one person speaking at a time. And speaking to Dr. Johnson's piece before, we want to talk about smoking in a really inclusive way, that this is not a place where we're blaming or shaming individuals, that this is a chronic medical condition. How can we support people? How can we, share the right information, accurate information to empower people to take control of their health? And I'm going to ask Katerina to actually stop recording.